Canadians are angry, not just at the carbon tax, but what's happening as a result of the carbon tax and what's happening as a result of the way that Trudeau is running his government. He's not doing what Canadians are voting for. He's doing his own vanity projects. He's running the country what seems to be into the ground based on his own ego. Luckily, Pierre took the time to call an emergency meeting in the House and he said, Trudeau, we need to stop the carbon tax. We need to meet about it now. He brought up a lot of really good points and he brought up a few things that need some context as well, because some of the things he said sound a little crazier than they are. However, we need to listen to what he says because it was very important and it was very eye-opening on what he said and how Canadians are feeling. Let's dive into what he said.
Mr. Speaker, imagine if, in fact, you were in a coma for the last 8 years. You would have gone to sleep in a country in 2015 where inflation and interest rates were rock bottom, taxes were following it faster than any time in Canadian history. The budget was balanced. Crime had just fallen 25% so that small town folks could leave their doors unlocked. Our borders were secured. Our immigration system was uncontroversial. Everyone agreed it worked and was the best in the world. Housing.
I think that's one of the biggest things when it comes to the immigration system. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, you just never heard people complaining about immigration. Like, Canada was a nation of immigrants, as they say, but the social cohesion and the time and effort put into the immigrants who came over, it was difficult 20 years ago to get to Canada. And there was a process in place. It wasn't just this open door policy of just let in anybody who wants to come here. And that's why it's crazy, because if you had asked me 15 years ago, like, what do you think about immigrants? I'd be like, oh, I don't know. It's fine. We're all immigrants, right? But then now if you ask me, I'm like, get them out of here. Sorry for yelling, but
costs half of what it does today. The average rent was $950, an almost laughably low number by today's standards. Take-home pay had risen by 10% after tax and after inflation in the preceding years. The New York Times had just called Canada the richest middle class. In fact, they said that Canada's middle class was richer for the first time than America's. This, with lots of trouble in the world, wars in Syria, Iraq.
Yeah, well, I mean, how do you feel, guys, at home? Like, do you feel like the middle class is disappearing? It does seem like that. It does seem like even if you get yourself like a reasonable job these days, what would have been a great income 10 years ago, it's like, oh, I have a great income and a reasonable job and I still have to live off credit card. And the amount of like global countries and news outlets that are saying like, yeah, we're not that bullish on Canada because it's basically being run into the ground. Like, if you think of Canada as like a company, it's like, hey, their CEO sucks and he's running the country into the ground. And it does seem that way.
Afghanistan, and yes, Ukraine, none of which caused inflation here at home. At the time, of course, we had Prime Minister Harper, who was able to keep inflation and unemployment low, even while the world suffered turmoil. But
I miss Harper. He was a real boring guy, but he made sure that the books were balanced and the budget was balanced.
Now you've awoken 8 years later to find a completely different place. Inflation, after hitting a 40-year high, is still 50% higher than its 2% target. The economy is shrinking in per capita terms. It's smaller than it was 6 years ago, perhaps the first time that has ever happened in Canadian history. Canada is expected to have the worst OECD growth out of 40 countries for the next 5.5 years and the next 35 years. It now takes 25 years to save up.
That's what I was talking about with the, productivity and how our country was going to do, like our actual economy. If we've such a strong potential to be a resource-led economy, making money, the natural gas we could be sending, instead we're giving that money to Russia, which is crazy because we could be supplying Europe. And so when they're talking about like, Canada's future is not looking great for the next 5 to 35 years, it's like, well, it could. And some of these things can be switched relatively quickly. He's about to get into some real estate stuff.
for a down payment for a mortgage in Toronto, and many people have had their existing mortgages extended to 90 years and 120 years, meaning their great-grandchildren will still be paying it off.
Okay, there I wanted to add some context for. So I've mentioned in other videos, I am a real estate agent in London, Ontario. Reach out to me in the link below if you want to set up a meeting about that, or work with anybody in my network all across Canada. That being said, when he's talking about the mortgages going to 90 or 120 years, that's a bit of a scary headline, but what actually happens is Canada has what's called, and I'm assuming he's talking about this, maybe there's some other thing, but what Canada has, we have what's called a variable payment, or sorry, a variable rate mortgage with a fixed payment. So what happens is the payment might be $1,800 when you first get it, and you'll have a certain split on what is going to your principal and what's going to your mortgage. If rates go up, the rate changes, so you're paying less to your actual principal. So then on paper, it shows like it's a 90-year mortgage, it's a 120-year mortgage. It's not really that, because when you renew your mortgage, everything is going to reset. So it's like, to say that grandkids are going to be paying off mortgages, it's like, all right, that's kind of a fake headline. Let's remove a little fear around that. It's kind of fake. But I mean, it's a serious thing if your payments are, slowing down on the principal, but that's not real.
Houses in Canada now cost 50% more than in the United States. You can buy a home, a castle in Sweden for a lower cost than it is for a 2-bedroom in Kitchener. Toronto is...
Yes, but if you go to Sweden, then you'll have to deal with all the Swedish people, and that could be no good.
The worst housing bubble in the world. Vancouver, the third most expensive when comparing median income to medium housing prices. This is the nightmare that would have been unimaginable to you had you fallen into that coma and just awoken now. But there is good news. You don't want to fall back into the coma, because the best is yet to come. We now have a common sense, conservative alternative that will axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime. We call on the Prime Minister to meet the premiers.
And lower immigration, please.
And talk to him about their desire to see the tax cut or eliminated altogether. Let us grant relief to our people now until there can be a carbon tax election where the people of this country will restore the common sense consensus that will allow anyone from anywhere to do anything, that their birthright is that with hard work you can afford a good home and good food in a safe neighborhood in the country we love, in this, all of our homes, your home, my home, our home. Let's bring it home. Yeah.
So what he said there is actually really interesting. It's a bit of a double-edged sword, though, because what he said is, hey, let's cancel the carbon tax right now. And the carbon tax is such a massive dividing issue right now. I mean, to be honest, I think most people are against it. But what he's saying is, let's vote in the carbon tax at the next election. And so if Trudeau wins again, he can institute the carbon tax again. I don't trust Canadians at this point to not vote Trudeau again, especially because the way that our election system works is Trudeau could be a major minority and still be in charge of Canada and then put in the carbon tax again. So it's like, I don't like that. Although everything's trending well for Pierre to be, the next option. It's like a pretty high, I don't trust Canada just yet. Those people to vote in Trudeau again. There's still a lot of crazy people out there, but I do think this is smart. So anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching the video. I think this is a really exciting announcement. Trudeau not answering this, which he won't, is a bit of a bummer, but I would love to see him also gamble and say, fine, we'll axe it. Let's vote it on the next one. Reach out to me in the link below if you do want to work with me or anybody else. And thank you so much for watching. Have a great rest of your day.